Hello, welcome to Stax-But. I'm Tim, and tonight I'm going to discuss stacks and what I think about it in the current meta. But before we get started, please check out our Discord and our Patreon. Links are in the description below. And if you like our content, please hit that like, share, subscribe. It really helps out a lot. I hope everybody's doing good tonight. This is going to be a little bit of a rough video just because I don't quite have everything together. We're kind of using a backup computer tonight, but I wanted to get a little something out the door because it's been a while. So stacks. I get a lot of questions from players wanting to know what stacks deck to play or what mid-range deck to play. Oftentimes they want to play non-blue. And I just wanted to give some thoughts that I have about those topics, kind of in a little more in-depth and a little more concisely than what I can pound down on a keyboard in 3 minutes while I have somebody's attention, okay? So for me, Stacks really is designed to kind of do one thing, and that is to slow my opponents down while I advance my plan. And it's really just to buy me time, all right? So that kind of brings me to my first talking point, which is that hard locking 3 opponents with stacks is something that's very difficult to do. You know, this is not 1v1 magic where once you lock a table, you've only got to deal with one person, because you've got 3 players you're playing against, and they're not incentivized to sit there and let you keep going. So if you play stacks, you really need to be able to pivot to a clean win quickly and be able to protect it, all under that same stacks. For example, let's say you've got a very large board, and we'll even go as high as, let's say you have 21 power on board. All right, that's a pretty hefty board of creatures, and you're trying to attack and kill opponents with combat. Okay, if they're at 120 life, which most likely they're not, that's going to take you 5.7 combats to kill a table. If they're at 90, which means that they've all lost 10 life from that life pool, then it goes down to 4.28. And if they're at 60, which means they've all approximately lost about half their life, you're still looking at 3 combat steps to eliminate a table with that 21 power. Now, granted, there's a lot of factors involved. You might draw more creatures to commit to the board. Other players might be attacking each other. But a lot of the times, you're going to be the one with all the stuff on the board. You're going to be the one stopping everybody from doing their game plan. And they're not going to be incentivized to play along. And with that in mind, that is a real, just really want to let you know what you're signing yourself up for in multiplayer. The other thing is with stacks, is that I play a lot of stacks, or I have in the past, and I play a lot of mid-range. And most of the stacks decks that I like tend to be able to be things I can play on their own hate. Like, for example, Arden and Tana Hipster Stacks is really nice because you've got all of those creature tutors. Arden plays under the Null Rod, and you've got a 1-card win con that's creature based in the form of Godo, and you can very easily tutor it up, and Arden equips the helm and you win. So it can go from stalling the game out to pivoting to a win very quickly. The second thing is that because you tend to be the one stopping everybody from having their fun, a lot of times you'll get things pointed at you that in reality may not necessarily be the optimal play, but from the perspective of the person who's slowly bleeding out, their chances of winning when they're at a 0.5% is better than them, having a 0% chance of winning. So that's kind of one thing you have to keep in mind. Next is that Stack games tend to draw out really long. And yes, I understand. I'll get comments that people will say, oh, I can finish a Stax game in 60 minutes or 75 minutes or Stax Mirror. And I get that. You can. I'm not saying you can't. What I'm saying is especially when you're learning, these games are going to drag. And people who want to play Stax, like, you're going to get less reps in learning your deck than your opponents are when they're playing proactive decks. Just plain and simple. Because if their games are only 30 or 45 minutes and yours is 90, they're getting a 2-to-1 ratio or whatever that number is. Like, I'm just kind of making it up out of my head. And then kind of next is that, one of the things, like, there are a couple of, like, decks that people consider Stax decks that maybe I don't consider Stax decks. A good example is Winota. Winota does play Stax, but the fact that it provides such an aggressive card advantage with Winota, and that just the reason why it's called Winota Snowball is because you keep getting those triggers, you keep increasing your power, you keep increasing the hate pieces on the board. It can push out a lot of damage very quickly while advancing its game land. Better than probably Arden and Tana can, but again, like, you get these nice, very clean wins. So, you might be asking yourself, why would I want to play Stax if one, it's going to make the games go long, it's going to make my opponents miserable, if I lose the game, I've really lost the game 3 turns before I've actually lost it. So kind of tracking and learning makes it very difficult. Am I just making myself play CDH on hard mode? Well, the answer is yes and no. All right. So for one, there's actually, maybe you just don't have to go as deep on Stax as you think you do. For example, you can, play about 4 or 6. I mean, when I look at decks and I'm wanting to put hate bears and Stax pieces in my deck, like, after about 6 or 7 slots, I'm really just either adding redundant copies or suboptimal redundant copies, even more accurately, or I'm just adding a higher density. Like, for example, out of the Stax pieces that are available in game right now, I would probably say there's 6 that attack the meta very well. All right. And we can kind of talk about those for a quick moment. Okay. So I'm going to go to permanent base first. So the ones that I really think are great are Rest in Peace, because it'll exile everybody's graveyard and then prevent everybody's cards from going into their graveyard, thus shutting off Breach, Reanimator lines. It hits a lot of relevant stuff. All right. And then the next one is Grafdigger's Cage. So Grafdigger's Cage doesn't allow your opponents to cast spells from graveyards or libraries, and then and then creatures can't enter the battlefield from graveyards or libraries. So that hits a lot of it. Obviously, it attacks Breach. Obviously, it attacks Reanimator, but it also shuts off like a lot of the evolution decks, because Eldritch Evolution, Neoform, like those types of Chord of Calling, all of those cards, Finale of Devastation, all get shut out. So a lot of those decks, like a lot of those mid-range decks, also rely on that also, in addition to. And while there's other stacks that is effective in this kind of, like, on the website, on the Budget Brews website, and they're all great pieces, like, those are the 2 that I probably think are the best currently. And those are the ones that, like, I want to play a lot of the time. And pretty much anything else I throw in there is almost filler. And it's not to say that there's not other good Stax pieces, but those are really, like, the best ones in my opinion right now. I'm not a huge fan of Rule of Law. I don't think it's great. Not to say it's not good. I just don't. I've played it. One spell per turn is not awesome when I'm the dude making everybody annoyed, because all of their interaction tends to get pointed at me, and I can't win. So I need to find pieces that I can play under, protect myself, and win through. And this was even before the channel lands were invented. you know. And then next, we kind of got like 4 really, really solid hate bears that I think are probably the strongest. There's like one more that's like a maybe. And again, not to say that there's not other good hate bears. These are just the ones that I really think are the best in the meta right now. They're asymmetrical, so I can play under them 100%. And I think they effectively target the most important strategies in the meta. They don't target specific like decks per se, but target strategies. So like they shut off Breach, they shut off a lot of the Oracle packages, a lot of the commander-centric combos, they shut off tutors. Like these are all things that I find to be much more effective than just making everybody play 1 spell per turn, because I'm just not high on it anymore. I've lost too many games to my own rule of law, because I try to do something that's scary, people counter it, and then somebody slips in their thing, and then people can kind of slow roll their win that way. And there's even a couple of rule of laws that like Oracle Council doesn't give a shit about. I have found it much better to hit them with these 6 pieces. So the first one is Aven Mind Sensor. The Aven Mind Sensor is great because it has flash, it has flying, so we can use it to draw cards with like Tymna. And it's asymmetrical, so I can tutor, they can't. So the first 2 I showed you were symmetrical, so they're a little harder to play under. But Aven is not. So I can find what I need, they can't. It doesn't totally lock them out, but it's pretty good. And having flash is nice, so I can just kind of... Sometimes I gotcha with it, but most of the time it's just... it allows me to use my mana efficiently. And then since it's evasive, I can continue attack. The next one's pretty obvious, Draeneth Magistrate. Draeneth Magistrate shuts off all kinds of stuff. Much more akin to how the Grafdigger's Cage and how Rest in Peace are. They shut off Breach, and it shuts off commander-centric combos, and it shuts off a lot of things that you like. Anything that you could cast from exile, it shuts off that. Anything from top of library shuts off that. It really just hits a lot of stuff. If I was to name the hardest working man in 2022 CDH, that's it right there. So, and then next after that, the next 2 are black. So we've got Dauthi Voidwalker. It's a 3/2 with Shadow for black. So Shadow again gives us evasion, helps us kind of get in there with the Tymna draws, and then has a static ability of if a card would be put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, you exile it. So it's a redundant copy of like Rest in Peace, except it doesn't hurt me. It only hurts my opponents, which makes it even better. And then on top of that, if you decide to not attack with it, you can leave it up and then tap it and sack it and cast one of those spells. So if I'm playing my own, even if I have my own Draeneth in play, I can still cast other people's stuff from exile. All right. So you kind of see a theme here. A lot of these are going to be things that I can play under regardless and not have a problem. And then lastly, for kind of the big 4 hate bears, I think is going to be Op Agent. Op Agent is a Aven Mind Sensor with upside at the cost of evasion. So it's a 3/2, so you get a little more power. It has flash. It hard locks all your opponents from searching libraries. If somebody does search their library, you get to go search instead and get one of their cards, and then you can cast it whenever you want. Well, timing restrictions apply. And really, like, I haven't found that I've really wanted anything past those 6 cards for hate pieces. Not to say that there aren't good hate bears. I mean, there's obviously other good hate bears. I mean, I have a whole page of them with about almost 80 hate bears at this point. And in fact, there's probably a couple more I could add on there. Those are really like the big 4. And then the same thing with the permanent based interaction is that, I've got another 33 hate pieces on here. You know what I'm saying? So, this kind of leads into the next part. All right. So, if you notice that pretty much all of these hate bears cost 1 or 2 mana, or they're going to have flash to allow me to kind of sneak them in and instant speed. Because one of the big incentives in multiplayer, and it took me a long time to really kind of acknowledge this and see it for what it really was, is that in Commander, we are highly, 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 highly incentivized to play proactive strategies. Okay? So what that means is that the cards that are featured in proactive decks are so strong that even when we're playing a disruptive or a reactive deck, aka a stacks deck or mid-range deck, we want to be playing the same cards. If you are in red, you would be a fool to not play Dockside, right? If you are a fool and you are in black, you are highly incentivized to play things like Ad Nauseam. I mean, I've seen turbo Stax decks, and they're still running PETA, and they're still running Ad Naus, because paying 5 mana to draw 10 cards is great. Paying 2 mana and getting 10 mana, or 6 mana, or just 3 mana is great. Not to mention the recursive, like the abusability and such like that. So that's one of the things you have to kind of really keep in mind, is that even when you're playing stacks, you're still tend to be playing a lot of these cards. So therefore, the decks that are playing cards that will just leverage them better, because they're not playing a bunch of rule of laws and a bunch of null rods and a bunch of hate pieces like that. The decks that so that way they're not playing a bunch of like null rods, like a storm deck or even just a mid-range deck. Like, you're still going to play those cards. And the decks that have the wheels to refill their hand, the decks that have the Ad Nauseam to refill their hand, the decks that are running Oracle to have the most compact win con. The reason why those are strong is because of the way the game has been designed to incentivize us to play it. Like, even if you're playing a 3 null rod deck, you're still running Crypt, Diamond, most likely Chrome Mox. If you're in red, most likely Dockside. Not universally, not all the time, but most of them are. So it's like, what's the point of playing a null rod or a rule of law if I'm topping if I want to top Dockside? Because I'm not always going to curve Dockside into a bunch of stacks pieces. Like, I'm just going to be honest. Like, the amount of times that happens is way less than me drawing it randomly mid-game and it being useless under my 5 stacks pieces. So therefore I'm always, not only I'm just constantly putting myself at a disadvantage by playing stacks. Doesn't mean that I don't play it. It just means that I need to acknowledge and sign up that I'm signing up for playing CDH or Commander on hard mode versus my opponents. And then on top of that, not only am I playing on hard mode because of just the way the game is designed, I'm playing hard mode because my opponents are pretty grumpy and miserable because I'm taking all their fun away. And then people do dumb things when they're under pressure. Like, a lot of times, and I've had this is honestly the main reason why I stopped playing stacks for the most part, is because I'll do all the heavy lifts in all game. I will have everybody soft locked. I'll try to win in the mid game. 5 pieces of interaction get pointed at all my stuff because, you know, I'm the only one trying to do anything. Somebody removes the wrong stacks piece, console player wins. Because they stopped the first guy and then he wasn't really the one, like he wasn't the most prepared he thought he was. Or as I'm amassing a board, like let's say, like again, go back to that 3 turns. 3 turns is a long time. A long time in Commander. Because even if the game is last 6 turns, which the last time I read the metagame project, I think we're around that 5 to 6 turn is the average. Like, I'm not developing a strong board until my 3rd turn. So therefore, I am going to that longer stage. But that is that's a lot of Crom draws. That's a lot of Ristic Study draws. That's a lot of refills off of wheels that I have to deal with. And as the Stacks player, nobody's my friend. Nobody wants to be my friend because I'm stopping everybody from doing all the fun. So as I start killing off players, everybody will get more and more desperate because they'll see the writing on the wall, and then everybody just starts making sloppy plays. So not only am I de-incentivized from playing Stacks by the overall structure of multiplayer and the overall structure of the Commander card pool, I'm de-incentivized because my opponents, you know, maybe because I'm not as smooth of a talker as Charles, I guess. I don't know. Like, I know Charles does well with Stacks, and I know he's a good player, and I'm not a slouch. Maybe I'm just not as smooth as he is. I don't know. But I would always go to close out the game, and basically, unless somebody misplayed really hard and it worked out in my advantage, I'd get ganged up on and stopped, and there wasn't much I could do about it. So therefore, I would just wind up losing. And I see that a lot with other players playing Stacks. I think that Charles is the exception, not the rule. He is a great player, and there are other good Stacks players, but again, isolated exceptions, and I don't think that that's the universal experience. And it's not to say that I don't play these types of decks once in a while for fun, because I do like playing Arden and Tana. I do like playing the old, like I used to enjoy playing Bloodpot. I like playing Shorekai. Like, I don't play them a ton, but I like playing them from time to time. And when I do, it always feels like I'm playing from behind. So, I guess to kind of wrap this all up, I really feel that, like, in the current meta, especially with how of a disadvantage not playing things like wheels and rituals and all the fast mana and all of the, like, dockside, that I would be doing the community a disservice if I was hyping Stacks. Now, again, outside of those 6 pieces that I talked about earlier, which was Draneth, Op Agent, Dalthi Voidwalker, Aven Mind Sensor, Rest in Peace, and Crafter's Cage, I think that maybe the rest of it's excessive, but a deck playing those 6 pieces and say, I've been personally right now, I'm playing I just put together, I'm going to start testing it, a Thrasios Timna mid-range shell with those 6 Stacks pieces in it to kind of act as a way to buy me time to get my engines online. You know what I'm saying? And I don't feel that I need much past that. I think anything past that is probably overkill for me. And it's not necessarily just because I'm in Thrasios Timna, but just in general. There's some other stuff. Another thing that I've kind of found is that I tend to not... Most of the Stacks decks that I've played over the last couple of years, or last 18 months, my creatures aren't that big. I'm not getting through very much. Like, when I play Winota, sure, I get through, because they get indestructible, and Winota's a 4/4. But like if I'm playing like a or I'm getting through and it's just so slow that I just give all my opponents like a million turns to close the game out because the game devolves into me trying to manually beat them. And I know Kamal's a thing, but like 8 mana, come on, let's be real. If you got 8 mana to cast that guy, and that guy can beat people down, you probably could have just beat him with a paper bag. Like I don't know, man. I'm just not super. I have been repeatedly disappointed by Stax. Mid range ain't much better, honestly. But I'll talk about that in another video. So, thanks again. You can put all the hate mail in the comments. I'll make sure to read them and reply. Again, thanks for listening. Please hit that like, share, subscribe. Have a good night.